We're now live, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Joining remotely, we've got Councillor Rob Wilson with another question, Toyin Bamadell, and later for the Child Services item, Mark Barrett, Tim Smith and Janet Croft. We've got apologies from Steve Charnley, Royal Croft is substituting, and we've also had apologies from Alan Mosley. And what I thought was actually here, item number 2, if I could just go around and everyone could introduce themselves and then they could say whether they've got the interests or not, obviously the councillors, not the officers.
Hi, yeah, my name's Graham White, I'm a solicitor for the council.
Robert Macy, Shropshire Councillor for Development South and West Midlands.
Yeah.
Roger Evans, Shropshire Councillor for the London Division.
Dave Asper, Councillor for Underdown, Shrewsbury.
And I am presuming that you've got no declarable interest. You didn't say, but I'm presuming.
No declarable interest apart from being Shrewsbury Town Councillor.
Okay, fine, thank you, Julia.
Julia Buckley, Councillor for Bridge North West and Tasley.
Royal Croft, Shropshire Councillor for Market Drayton, Norton House and Wall, and no pecuniary interest.
Thank you. Who's going next? Go on then, Joyce.
Joyce Barrow, Shropshire Councillor for St Oswald.
Thank you.
Heather Rollick, Butchers North.
Lesbian Wood, Bridge North West and Tasley.
Thank you. And I don't know, Daniel, if you want to just introduce him.
I was just Daniel Webber, the Scrutiny Officer.
Right, thank you. And also present at the back there, we've got Councillor Julian Dean. Right, thank you. And James Walton, who is our finance.
Yeah, James Walton, Executive Director of Justice.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, so item number 3 is the minutes from the 18th of January. These were circulated today. Committee can approve them or they can defer them to the next meeting if there's going to be a long debate about them. So I'm open to suggestions. Roger's usually got something there. What do you think?
Proposing Chairman.
Right, okay, thank you, Roger.
Second.
Joyce, second. Can I just have a show of hands? That's unanimous, thank you. So we've got one public question. So what I'm going to do is, let me just see, we've got Martina Chamberlain and Sally Stoke for and on behalf of Save Our Shire Hall. Are you actually on the call? You actually join the meeting or?
I did ask if they were going to join us, Claire, but didn't receive a reply. If you wish, I can read out the question, or you can read it out.
Okay, I'm fine. Yeah, if you'd like to read out the question, Amanda, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, the question is, in a recent BBC Radio Shropshire interview, the leader of Shropshire Council said that a realistic figure for putting right a building that is far too big for us and no longer required is somewhere around 35 to 40 million pounds. Could the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee please inform us and the public or look into where is the feasibility study, where are the new refurbishment plans, and where are the costings for this new figure being used by the leader?
Thank you, Amanda. I believe we've got Tim Smith here on Teams. Would you like to answer the question, Tim?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody. The response to the question that you've just heard is as follows. No further detailed work was undertaken in terms of feasibility for the refurbishment of the Shire Hall after the key decisions taken at the council meeting of the 16th of July 2020. In the report, it advised that in the Stage 2 financial business case, which was prepared by Ryder Levitt Bucknell, identified an estimated cost of 24.1 million, and this was on the basis of fully refurbishing the Shire Hall, and that figure was presented as part of the report to full council in December 2018. The leader in her interview would have been referring to the significant inflationary increases combined with the increase in material costs over the time that has elapsed since 2018, which was the last appraisal of cost. She would have also be likely to be taking into account the significant additional costs in bringing the building, being the Shire Hall, up to an appropriate standard to meet the council's commitments in terms of its declared climate emergency, which was post the original estimates, those being in 2018, and combined with costs associated with the enhancements to meet the requirements of the new Building Safety Bill Act of 2021, which are again subsequent to the original estimate. That is the response, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, I'll move on to item number 5, member question. Councillor Rob Wilson, are you on the call? Yeah, you're there.
I am.
Right. Would you like to read your question out?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask, pass the page. Later today, the committee is considering the capital strategy. I'd like to seek clarification for 2 items. Firstly, the circa £4 million allocated for the purchase of the NCP car park in Wildcop. Secondly, the £4.5 million allocated to the possible construction of a multi-storey car park. How does this square with the aims of the Big Town plan to place car parking outside of the River Loop?
Okay, I think this has been kicking around a while actually, but I will ask Tim to answer the question for you. If you'd like to answer, Tim.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Wilson. In response to the 2 questions, so I'll take them in turn. So in respect of the NCP car park on Wildcop in Shrewsbury, the response is this. In line with the Council's capital strategy, the strategic acquisition of the NCP car park in Shrewsbury has been approved, but negotiations relating to the proposed acquisition are still taking place. The Council's main interest in the NCP car park in Shrewsbury relates to its future economic regeneration potential, being located in a gateway position to the east of the town and within the Big Town Plan development area. The Council owns land adjacent to this site. Council officers embarked on negotiations with the landowner following full council approval via negotiations with the appointed agent. It appears that the owner no longer wishes to sell the site at this point in time. It will continue to be used as a car park in this local location, therefore, under current lease arrangements, as it remains in private ownership. Would you like me to answer the second part, Chair?
Yes, you may as well, Tim, while you're on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in response to question 2, an investment of £4.5 million to revitalise Bridgnorth High Street and public realm has been agreed by Cabinet as part of the Council's wider financial strategy. This is subject to agreement at full council before specific reports on the details of the scheme are considered and agreed, and a public consultation is then to be carried out. The money itself hasn't been allocated to a specific project or piece of work, and council officers are working through the data from the recent public engagement to understand which projects people living and working in Bridgnorth want the council to deliver. The officers are refining and pricing proposed schemes, and the options will be presented to Cabinet and to full council in the new financial year for approval. While the multi-storey car park is a potential option for Bridgnorth, there are a number of other schemes being considered, such as public realm improvements, pedestrianisation, active travel, etc. That is the answer to the second question of Councillor Wilson's.
That's very helpful, thank you.
Right, so you're satisfied with your reply there?
Thank you, Chair, yes.
Okay, fine, thank you. Right, so we've now got questions from Roger. Roger, do you want to read your questions out, or?
Yeah, please, thank you, Chairman. Questions from myself. I'll read out the full question and then I think the responses are in part, so I may want to ask supplementaries out to each of the answers, but if I read the full question out to start with, it might ease the time and the situation. I'd like to ask the following, please. It is in several parts and is for information concerning the council's finances in readiness for the more general discussion later in the meeting. Apprenticeship levy. How much was collected from schools and Shropshire Council during the last financial year? Was any of this money handed back to government? Government COVID grants. How much is expected forecast we will be carrying over unspent at the end of March 22? Government has asked in the past for details updates on additional expenditure funded by ring-fenced COVID-19 grant. This, I think, covers 3 interconnected worksheets. Can a copy of the latest return be provided, please? I understand there is what I think is called a resilience index or report on each principal council. Can we be told what the latest one for Shropshire is, please, and when this was issued?
Right,
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, over to you, James.
Okay, Chair. So in terms of the first question, which was about the apprenticeship levy and how much has been collected from schools and Shropshire Council, and was any of this handed back to government? So apprenticeship levy payments made into the council's apprenticeship levy fund during 2021 were for corporate 424,969, for schools 169,881, plus a total of 594,850. Of that, 67,794 pounds funds expired during 2021 and therefore were returned to central government. However, no funds have expired at all since July 2020, and no funds are forecast to expire within this financial year. The next question was around government.
Do you want me to ask a supplementary to that one, Chairman, or wait till the end?
Well, if you let James give the answers and then ask supplementary at the end, I think that's probably best.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll carry on then. So the second question was then around COVID grants. How much is expected, forecast to be carried over unspent into at the end of March 22? On ring-fenced COVID-19 grant received was £7,632,211. All grant will be utilised this year with no carry forward going into next year. The unring-fenced grant is being used to cover also income and additional expenditure incurred as a result of the pandemic. All costs relating to managing the outbreak itself are being funded from the Contain Outbreak Management Fund, which is called the COMP grant, which is a ring-fenced grant to be used by public health activities for public health activities such as testing, tracing, containing the outbreak and supporting vulnerable communities. The council has received £9,494,812 of COMP grant in total, 611,337 of which was spent at the end of 2021. Forecast expenditure this year is approximately 6.5 million, and the ring-fence grant remaining at the end of this year will be carried forward in 22-23. And I'll be testing the committee on whether they remember all those numbers at the end. The third question was around government has asked for details in the past of additional expenditure funded by unring-fenced COVID grant, and asked for copies of the 3 interconnected worksheets. So details of how the COVID-19 grant is forecast to be allocated have been attached in a spreadsheet and have been sent to the councillor in question. These tables will be included in the Q3 financial monitoring report, so will be part of the public documentation. And then the final question was around the resilience index report. When was the last one issued for Shropshire? So the latest SIPFA resilience index was released for the 2019-20 financial year, and is publicly available on the SIPFA website, SIPFA being the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. With national delays in closing 2021 accounts, it's unclear when this index will be updated.
Okay, right, so you want supplementary questions, Roger?
If I can, Chairman. As far as the first question goes about the apprenticeship levy, did the schools spend all their levy, or did Shropshire Council use some of that levy to finance what it wanted to do with apprenticeships? As far as the second one goes, I noted the third one about the COVID grants. Thank you, James, for that. And the last one about the SIP resilience index. When I received the answer a few minutes ago, I tried the SIPFA website and it says member. Now, I seem to remember reading somewhere where Shropshire Council has withdrawn membership from SIPFA. So I haven't tried to get on it, but are Shropshire Council, or do I need a membership to actually access the SIPFA website? I've got a printout and it says name and then password. So I can get into it, and it's a question whether we're still a member of SIPFA, Chairman.
Yeah, and I think from memory we had this question before, and I think there are better comparables. So I leave that to James.
Just very quickly on that one. It's on the SIPFA website. I went on it myself last night just to check. I didn't log in as a member. Obviously, I'm a member of SIPFA personally. I didn't log in as a member, and I was able to get it up. So on that basis, I assume that anybody can access it publicly. If you can't, then I know I can get into it, so I can send you that information as necessary. It's in terms of your question there, Chair. This was the national sort of database around levels of reserves that held within authorities, and the idea was it was to identify which authorities were at risk or not. There are lots and lots of questions around it that hanging in the air, so it's not the greatest comparison, but it is something that you can at least benchmark nationally against. You don't have to be a member of the SIPFA benchmarking club or in terms of the SIPFA stats, because this is all collected from the statement of accounts information that's provided at the end of the year. In terms of your first question, sorry, Councillor, the breakdown between schools and corporate, whether all the funds were utilised in those particular areas, or the breakdown of that, I don't have that information to hand, but I can find that.
Yeah, we can send that to all members if you like.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Please, Chairman.
All members of the committee, I think, probably. Unless you want to send it to all members, it makes no difference. What do you want, Roger?
I think it might be useful to send to all members of the council so that they can see what is happening with the apprenticeship levy, because it is there for use by schools and Shropshire Council. And if there is money available for schools, then schools may be able to use it if they are aware of it.
Okay, that's fine. We'll send it to all members, please. Thank you. So moving on to item number 6, which is the mid-year capital and financial strategy 2022 to 23 to 25-26. The report was circulated with the agenda. So what it says here is James is going to be presenting and Troyan's going to be answering the questions. Is that right, James? Is that the way around?
I like it that way around.
Yeah.
But if you're happy, Chair, just to give a very quick introduction to the paper. So this is the paper that was taken to Cabinet on the 5th of January. It sets out three key things. It sets the budget for 22-23, and the headline there is that we are able to set a legal budget for 22-23 in the sense that the resources that we are able to make available and the expenditure for the year as estimated are in balance. The second part is around the financial strategy, so the wider implications for 23-24 and beyond. So projections are built into the report to identify what the resources requirement looks like and what the expenditure is likely to be over that period of time, and that identifies a funding gap of between 55 and 60 million pounds each year beyond that first year. The crucial piece of information just to feed in there is for years 2 and 3. There was an expectation that the government would provide us with a 3-year settlement at the 16th of December 21. In fact, only 1 year was provided of that information, so there is an expectation that in years 2 and 3 there will be some government grants due to arrive that would help reduce some of that budget deficit, but at the moment that information is not available, so therefore we can't estimate what that would be. And the third element of the report is around the capital strategy. So this sets out the plans and the approach for the capital plans, the large expenditure items over the next 4 to 5 years, and what they would cost and how they would be funded from significant areas such as capital receipts and the potential for borrowing. And the link between all of those elements is that where there is borrowing that is required, there would then be a requirement on revenue to fund that borrowing, which then fits into the financial strategy and is factored into those costs in years 2 to 5 within the plan. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to take any questions or happy to explain any parts of the report that the members would like to consider. And as you said, Toyin is here online as well to answer all your questions that I.
Right, Roger, you've got a question for Toyin, yeah?
Yes, please, Chairman. I note the report's in 3 parts, and I thought dealing with each part separately might ease it. And if my first question is about the actual report itself, which is only 5 pages long, and it's about the climate change appraisal in it, where it states that there was £1 million initial investment 21-22 and 500,000 in the next current year. But in the financial strategy for last year, it said there about climate change appraisal, and the decision by the council at that time was that and I'll read it out, the council receives a share of profits from the jointly owned West Mercia Energy joint arrangement. Electricity supplied to Shropshire Council is now supplied from a 100% renewable sources. Furthermore, profit share received from WME is ring-fenced to support climate change initiatives in Shropshire, such as LED street lighting programme. And it says about building zero carbon houses as well. Is the 500,000 the complete money that WME has, or have we gone back on that and only now putting 500,000 into the climate change, please?
Okay, so if I may, Chair, there's a number of elements to that. So in terms of that statement made in that approval made last year, that still stands. So the profits that are being made from West Mercia Energy will be factored into climate change in the future. So what that means is that in simple terms, there will be a reserve set up, and the profits from profit share from West Mercia Energy will go into that reserve and will be held there for spending on climate change initiatives. There is a variable element to that around what profits will actually be made. So what we've done is we've taken out the base budget. There used to be a base budget element of those profits that were supporting council expenditure. So as part of the financial strategy, we've taken that base budget element out so that all funding that comes in will go into that reserve that I talked about before and be used purely for climate change purposes. The £500,000 is in addition to that. That's a base budget that's being built in for climate change that will be ring-fenced entirely for climate change initiatives and will be bolstered each year by whatever the profitable level of WME is. So if WME made a profit and the Shropshire share was 200,000, then that would be 700,000 available in that year.
All right, so just interested in that. Do you know what the balance is on the account now, what we've got in this pot?
In terms of the reserve, that's been set up now. So at the moment, there was £1 million that was given in the current financial year. I don't know whether Toyin has got the information in terms of how much of that's been spent this year, but I think it's all been committed regardless of whether it was spent. And then going forward, there'll be 500,000 in base plus whatever profits come forward.
Okay, that's very good news. Okay, sorry, Roger. Carry on.
Yep. Thanks, Chairman. That is good news, because I thought the money going into climate change had been reduced, which is why the question, but to know that the WME money is going on top of that would be good. But I note that only some of the £1 million was spent. Is it anticipated that the full budget, full amount of capital will be spent next year? Although I am disappointed that the LED street lighting, which was in the budget prior to the council committed itself to a climate emergency was already in it. So I would have hoped that we could do pure change over and above the LED street lighting because of the decisions made 3 years ago about it.
Just on that, Chair, and I'll be watching Johnny's face correctly in case I get this wrong. My belief is that the LED programme was built into the capital strategy and didn't use any of the £1 million that was put into the climate change reserve in the current year. So that was in addition. So that £1 million is for additional initiatives on top of that. Actually, Tim's nodding and Johnny's nodding, so I'll stop now.
Yeah.
Last one on this one, Chairman, is that so will the LED lighting continue as it was and not use any of this? Because I note that the LED capital funding in the capital budget has been reduced down to just over £1 million a year for this year or for next year and the following year, where it was £3 million beforehand, I think. I would have wanted accelerated, but I noticed that there's £1 million and I would hope that this isn't being used for it.
I don't believe any of this funding is being allocated into the LED programme. In terms of the LED delivery, it looks like Tim's actually got his hand up, so maybe that he can tell you a little bit more about the delivery and the way the budget's sorted. But my understanding is that this is entirely separate funding for additional work on top of that.
Yeah, and just when you come back, Tim, I believe the council's involved in a rather large solar farm that's just happening at the moment as well. If you could just talk to us a bit about that as well, please. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and because it's obviously a really important point that Councillor Evans is making, I've got quite a detailed answer as it happens, so which I'm perfectly happy to share. But the street lighting LED replacement is estimated to be 6.2 million over a 3-year period, and supported by Salix. So about 48% of those funds will be Salix funding, and they'll support energy efficiency measures, and the remainder, the 52%, will be funded through Shropshire Council's Highways Maintenance Grant, and therefore won't be a call on the £1 million that James was referring to. So hopefully that provides reassurance to Councillor Evans on that point. And the second thing there, yes, obviously what we are doing, I manage the climate change team, Adrian Cooper heads that team, and we have brought forward an investment in a solar farm on land the council owns in Oswestry at Maysbury Road Industrial Estate, where we will be providing a energy supply to, we hope, and through negotiation, to not one but 2 local businesses, which will significantly reduce the costs of supply to support that business growth in that area. But also we will derive an income from that investment, and that is, as you were saying, Chair, one of the examples of how we're using the monies that are being assigned to climate change and to the commitment to achieve net zero by 2030.
Thank you, Tim. And I think it's important. I mean, I think the council are doing quite a lot as well, but I think it's important that we take businesses with us as well. So I'm really pleased about that particular scheme. Roger.
Well, I'll bring it in there rather than later. I note on a report I read this morning, I think, about some authorities are introducing a carbon budget alongside their financial budget. Given this council now as a climate emergency, and we're trying to do it, when it comes to council in February, this budget for approval, will it include a carbon budget to show how we're going and meeting our commitment, which is 2030? I prefer it earlier, but it's going for 2030. So will there be an indication how we are progressing with that, please?
So if I can come in on that, Chair. We would hope so. Whether we can or not, I don't know. What we've looked at, the portfolio holder has talked about working our way through the council's budget book and identifying which of those elements, how they relate to climate change in terms of positive or negative impact on those. And the concept of a carbon budget is something that we've been debating recently. through the carbon literacy training that's been undertaken by Cabinet and senior officers. And so the idea behind that is absolutely valid, and it's something that we would like to do. Whether we have time between now and Council on 24th of February to do that justice, I don't know. But we'll certainly be introducing it, if not by the 24th of February, then as soon as we can.
Thank you, James. Right, Roger. You?
I've finished that section, Chairman. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in before we go to the financial strategy itself.
Right, okay. So have we got any more questions of any of the other members? David?
Yes, just on the recommendations in the initial report. Obviously, this went to Cabinet, but I said this to Cabinet, but I just felt that the wording could be more stronger, let's say, in terms of lobbying government hard about the situation we find ourselves in. And I was wondering whether this committee could take a more kind of radical and perhaps a stronger view about the need for extra funding to making sure that this authority doesn't go bankrupt at some point in the future.
Okay, thank you, David. Well, what happens is our performance group scrutiny committee reports to Cabinet, and it is something that I mention every time I go, that we do need to lobby harder for fairer funding. So, have we got any other questions on firstly? No? Okay. Do you want to move on to the second bit of the part of the report now, James?
So basically, the second part of the report is the actual medium-term financial strategy. So this sets out the detail of the calculations around the resources that are available for the next 5 years. It sets out where those resources are coming from in terms of the grants and the council tax implications, the assumptions that have been made around those and the business rates. It then goes on to talk about the expenditure side. It picks up demographic growth, inflation, and other requirements. When those two parts are put together, you end up with a gap. So then it works its way then through details of savings proposals on income and expenditure as part of that, identifying where those could come from, and then ultimately results in an imbalance between the two areas, and that's where the one-off grants and the use of reserves and other one-off income is utilised to bring the 22-23 financial position to balance. But then in the future years, we have that funding gap that shows, which is based fundamentally around the structural funding gap of around about 50 million that has been in Shropshire Council's budget for several years now. And then at the end of that section, there are details then of the individual savings proposals, which are currently out for public consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, who wants to kick off? I guess Roger again. Go on then with your questions.
Well, would like to ask some questions about the individual savings, but before we get to that, I noticed that on page 21 of this report that I've got in front of me, and it's table 6, which is 2/3 way through the document, it's got the RAG ratings for 21-22 savings, and there's a sentence below that because it shows that just over £4 million was not saved, will not be saved in this current year, and it's going to have to be rolled forward into next year together with any new savings. And the sentence here says further work is required during the course of 21-22 to ensure that plans are in place for all these savings to be fully delivered from the 1st of April 22. Will they be fully delivered commencing in April? Are the plans in place to start delivering those from April the 1st?
So if I may, Chair, I'll hand over to Torian in a second, but I think this was an analysis that was taken.
What about
I was in response to my answer, that's okay. the analysis sets out the position at that point in time, that clearly the focus is on the just over 4.4, just over £4 million of red savings, which are spread around the various directions.
Shortly. Okay.
There will be a number of those elements which have now moved into amber, and there'll be a number of those that are being considered in further detail. There's quite a number of different savings plans within there, so we won't be able to give you a narrative on them all. But Victoria may be able to just provide you with some update in relation to some of those. But the point I would make is that we have factored those in based on those conversations with the budget holders as to what the 22-23 position should look like. So the 22-23 budget is based upon the analysis of which of those savings will be achievable and which ones won't. Do you want to come in on that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, James. Yes, James is totally correct. That was at the point in time, and I could actually say that we have factored in some of the red savings into the growth for 22-23, and that sentence really refers to the amber savings, and we have to do everything we could to make sure we deliver those by the 31st of March. And we are working with the service managers to make sure this is actually being delivered. For the red savings, we have identified a lot of those, and they have been built into the budget for 22-23. Okay. If you have any specific questions on any of them?
Roger, have you got specifics?
If I can, Chairman.
Yeah.
If they are not in place by April the 1st, then it means each of those savings need to be increased by 1/12 for every year after April. So if they're not introduced until June, the savings for each of those will increase proportionately in order to deliver the budget for the next financial year. Because as I see it, there is no financial ability to bolster the budget up if we do not meet what is being put forward by the Cabinet in the next financial year. In previous years and in this year, 1/3, approximately 40%, I think, 42% it shows there, and that's about where it's been for the last few years. Other savings have never been met by this council. Have the council the ability, given the general reserve and its forecast to be below what is considered to be the sustainable reserve, the safe reserve, what are we going to do if those budgets, if that figure cannot be attained in this next year?
Roger, when you were speaking, you said, I think what you meant to say was that the savings would have to go up by a 12th each month, not each year.
Each month?
Yeah.
Oh, so,
yeah. Yeah, because there's obviously 12 months in a year. So I just wanted to clarify that for Toyin. And I think Toyin knows the answer, not me, but I think some of the savings obviously vary from month to month, so it's not quite that easy. But anyway, you got the gist of the question, Toyin.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say the red savings have been built in as part of specific pressures into 22-23 budget to make sure that if we couldn't deliver them, so the ones we'll be worried about are the amber savings, which is 1.7 million. We've also got plans working with the service managers to make sure we can deliver those 1.7. But before we actually start April, and I totally appreciate where you're coming from because the pressure goes into next year if we're unable to deliver them. We've got plans in place and we're very hopeful that even if they're not delivered on a permanent basis, there'll be alternative savings being brought forward and one-off savings that we could use to actually fund it in a year.
If I may, Chair, just to find a little bit more assurance around that, just building on what Troy said there. If you look back over the last few years, Councillor Evans is absolutely correct. There have been elements of savings that have been unachieved. However, what we have been able to do, as Troy alluded to there, is find compensatory savings. They may be one-off, but it's allowed us more time to then deliver those savings in base budget. So you'll see over the last, I think 6 of the last 7 years, despite the fact that some of those savings have not been delivered in year, we nevertheless have provided a balanced budget. So we found compensating savings. So there's no reason to believe that we wouldn't be able to do that in the next financial year, just continuing that trend. The other part to this as well is that we do have a risk assessed general fund balance. So where there is an overspend that cannot be met by one savings, we do have that general fund balance safety net. So although I think as Councillor Evans was alluding to, reserves have been used up to bring 22-23 into balance. Those reserves were used up, the general fund balance, which is the safety net, is still there. So that would still apply for the next financial year.
Okay, thank you. Julia's got a question, if you don't mind, Roger. I'll come back to you in a minute. Julia, go.
Actually, I just wanted to add a comment onto Roger's question, really, which is that I would want to understand the reasons, so the source of the explanation as to why the savings were not achieved since 2018, because my suspicion is that the capital savings were delayed around all the capital project delays around supply chains and things being thrown off course, and that the revenue savings have been thrown off course by COVID, meaning that our staff are having to do different jobs. If either of those are even a fraction of the reason that savings were not made in the last 3 years, then how can we possibly have any confidence that either of those problems would not continue into the year ahead? And I really appreciate Daniel saying that you managed to find alternative, James, find alternative savings to sort of get us out of a tricky situation. But a lot of that is what we see in the budget in front of us, which is trimming the staff base, so not replacing staff when they leave, deleting vacancies, which I'm sure you appreciate more than us, just adds pressure to the staff who remain in post. Obviously, there's a minimum threshold below which we just can't go, and we have to protect our staff from any more workload. Thank you.
Do you want to make a comment on that, James? Or?
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely correct, and it's absolutely fair. What we want to do is to deliver the savings as proposed, and deliver them in the way that they're intended, because that then has the impact that we expected from that. Absolutely, alternative savings, both Troy and I refer to them as one-offs, because they are not sustainable and long term, and so absolutely there are impacts of those. The job of the 151 officer, and get your violins out now, is to try and keep those things in balance all the time. So how do we keep a balanced budget at the same time as keeping the organisation going? So it's making careful decisions on the back of that, and importantly not making rash decisions. So there are longer term implications, absolutely, but we can't not face up to those long term implications by pretending that we can afford it when we can't. The good news going forward, and as Troy has talked about a few times there, the red savings that have been identified from 21-22, there's been a robust analysis that's been undertaken on those specifically to identify, across the whole of the savings proposals, to identify which of those we actually cannot deliver going forward. So where there have been delays in relation to COVID, for example, and that's had implications for the market in which we're trying to make those savings, for the staff that are trying to deliver them, for the way in which they would work in a post-COVID world. All of those have been taken into account. And so when you look at the 22-23 budget, where those savings cannot now be delivered, they have been taken out, and growth has been built in to take that saving out of the proposals going forward, and they've been replaced by different savings which are now deliverable on a permanent basis in a, for example, post-COVID world. So there is a much stronger robustness to the 22-23 financial year budget than has been there previously, because of all this additional work that's been done. It's not perfect, but it's a lot stronger than it's ever been.
Yeah, and can I just add there, Julia, that the financial task and finish group, what they do is that they do look at all these things, and so for instance our next meeting is about adult social care, and we will go through all these things with quite a fine tooth comb for probably about 3 hours and have all the officers there, and they are useful because quite clearly, in a private meeting, you can actually understand some of the underlying issues far better than you can in a public forum. And you know, members are allowed to come and listen if they want to when we have these meetings. And they are very interesting because I think then you get to understand the nuts and bolts of what's going on. So have you got anything else to say, James? Or right, Roger, you wanted to
hand up, or is that legacy?
So Roger was in the middle, and I asked Julia to have a go because he'd been stealing the show a bit. So have you got your hand up, David? I'll give David a go and then come back to you, Roger.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just wanted, looking at the savings that have been delivered, a table for 23-24. I know it's looking a bit into the future, but if you look there, there's basically a total savings of 6 million, but 4 million of those come from two areas. One is to do with green waste, and the other one is to do with review of the customer service team. And I wondered how realistic that is, those identified savings in the future, given that the leader of the council, I think, has said that, you know, that she's not in favour of charging for green waste. It does seem that it's a, you know, I know it's going forward, but it does seem that there's a quite a substantial number of savings there, which might not be achievable.
Yeah, and again, I'll say to you, David, you know, obviously we're under a phenomenal amount of pressure. I mean, possibly this year, I think it's going to be 86% of our net budget is going to go on adult social care. So, you know, we do need to lobby for fairer funding, and part of this, you know, we can look at those future savings at the Financial Task and Finish Group because clearly they're in the future. You know, now we don't know what's going to happen between now and then, but it is an issue that we could look at there, and I'm more than happy for us to discuss that, because I think that these meetings are important, but I think what it does is it highlights the need to actually have an in-depth look at some of these areas, and that's why it's quite important that the Financial Task and Finish Group can actually pick one particular item and actually have a really good chew over on that. Right, Roger, you've got a couple more questions, if you.
Yes, Chairman, on this section. I understand where Councillor Erasmus is coming from, and understand this council is under pressure, but I do note that Cambridgeshire, for example, have got so much COVID available to roll forward into the next financial year that they are paying for free school meal vouchers for all those children entitled to free school meals at every school holiday during the next financial year. We're looking at child catering later on. I'm not making any comment about that. Cambridgeshire have decided their children are so important and they've got COVID reserve and they're using it for that. I'm disappointed that we haven't got any COVID reserve and that's been used. But my question is on earmarked reserves. I see in 5.1 where it's got the funding gap for 22-23 through to 26-27, that use of earmarked reserves, 6.128 million is being used in order to attain a balanced budget for next year, which will leave £34 million back in earmarked reserves. When I've wanted to have a look at earmarked reserves in the past, I've always been told, no, it's needed. Now there's 25% or thereabouts of earmarked reserves now being used to balance the budget for next year. Don't know what those earmarked reserves are. I assume it will be in the council papers because they're not listed here at all. So how members can actually agree it or make comment on it in a consultation when some earmarked reserves are being taken out and used for this, when we do not know what those earmarked reserves are, I'm not sure. But I noticed, as I say, £6 million of earmarked reserve. Has James got any comments on those reserves that he is having to take out in order to obtain the balanced budget ready for council?
Yeah, for my chair. So when we were trying to bring the budget into balance, we had plan A, plan B, plan C, all sorts of different approaches based on trying to deliver a balanced budget, and that was ahead of receiving the provisional settlement on the 16th of December. So what we looked at as an option was under, certainly not the best case situation, which of the earmark reserves that we have got held could we reconsider and utilise to help balance the budget if it was necessary. So the responses you would have received previously around these earmark reserves and their purposes is absolutely valid. The point here is that they will not be being used for the purposes in which they were intended, because they're being used to balance the budget. So that was a decision that was taken on the back of the level of settlement that we received, because ultimately we had to find a way to balance the budget. Had we received the settlement earlier, then we could have made alternative plans. Had the settlement been higher, then we wouldn't have had to use them. But we just had to cut our cloth according to the information that's available to us, and that meant that we've had to, unfortunately, look at a number of earmark reserves and take those balances out to try and balance the books. I don't know whether Troy's got any other comments on that. You don't have to, but no.
No other comments, Tom. Right, thank you. Roger.
Following that, Chairman, I'm concerned. Peer reviews have always warned us 3-4 years ago, do not rely on the funding formula to get out. You need to sort the budget out so that it is sustainable. In James's comments here, he says there's a structural deficit of £50 million per year, and we do not seem to be addressing that. We're doing short-term measures, as we have been for the last number of years, short-term every year and bringing it together. And I congratulate James and his team on actually being able to balance the budget, but our financial ability and the reserves are gone. And this last year, we're now tackling our earmarked reserves in order to balance the budget. What are we going to do in 23-24 if the fair funding formula does not come in? Because we are going to be in trouble, because I cannot see where the finances are going to come from to balance our budget. Other authorities are managing it. Shropshire is not. And as you have said, and you said last year, I think, that it would not be possible to put a sustainable budget forward for 22-23. You have. Congratulations, it's there. I don't think it's sustainable, but the budget for next year is there. The structural deficit is still there. What are we doing to actually tackle it?
Can I just, you sort of contradict yourself a little bit there, Roger, because you say other councils are dealing with deficits or we're not. But other councils don't spend 86% of their net budget on adult social care, so I think that was a bit ungracious. And I think it's probably a political question in that we absolutely need fairer funding from the government, because, there's no doubt about it, Shropshire Council is in the financial fix because of the amount of money that we spend on adult social care. Spending 86% of the budget this year is not sustainable in the long term, and I think everyone agrees with that. Roger.
We're spending it because that's the way we do it. And I look at some of the proposed savings and the things that we propose doing, and I'll come to those and some of those in a minute, especially with adult services. But I attended the CCN County Council Network last week, where Shire authorities attended. Shire authorities are managing. Shropshire is not unique. Nowhere near is it unique. Others are managing. Some are in trouble, and the government have gone in to sort those authorities out, and they are in the process of doing so. But there's other Shire authorities have managed the budget in the last 2, 3, 4 years. They've tackled the structural deficit, which I referred to, because that's what's dragging us every year. It has not been sorted. And I note your comments about people cabinet members try to do it. This authority had star chambers about 3 years ago, where every officer, cabinet member went in and were interviewed and told, you will attain this budget, you will meet all its targets, and in a star chamber atmosphere, which I couldn't go to because I come from where I do, but others from the administration did and officers did, and there were guarantees given at that time that the budgets would be met by the appropriate departments. For one reason or another, they never did, they never have. We have a structural deficit because we do have a lot of older people, but it's the way that we've dealt with them, the way we've dealt with them in the last 4, 5, 6 years. Other authorities obviously do different things. They are managing their budget.
Well, I suggest you come to the next financial task and finish group and tell us how you think that we can reduce the adult social care bill. Because I mean, looking at it, I haven't looked at what we're going to look at next time at the meeting, but looking at it all, our adult social care service wins quite a lot of awards, and it seems to be very good at what it does. So I'm just, you know, we can't help the demographics in Shropshire, Roger, but if you say that the adult social care team are not running the service properly and there's money to be had, then come and tell us. Come and tell us what these things are. I think that's the thing.
I'm not the administration. I would have adopted things many years ago to try and tackle it, do things a different way. It isn't an instant one, I admit, but I am not the administration. I ask the questions and try to find out how this authority is happening and what it is doing. I haven't got all the information available. I'm not there having weekly briefings or anything like that. So all I'm asking questions on is the budget that the council is being asked to approve in February, because that's what we need to approve. Legally, we have to approve a budget, and I'm trying to see how viable it is, and also looking at 23-24, when I'm not sure how we're going to put a budget together. It'll be up to James and the cabinet and the administration to put a budget together for 23-24. But that's the last of my questions here. I've got 1 or 2 questions on the actual savings that are highlighted, which I can ask now. I don't know if anybody's got any general questions before I ask questions about some of those.
Yeah, I just think that, you know, if you've got questions, specific questions about where you think adult social care services are failing and where they are spending excessive amounts of money, then it's your duty as a councillor to say so.
I took part in a task and finish group looking at adult services and looking at remote operation. I forget the words that are used, where you can do it by using modern IT systems and everything like that and connected with it. There was an exhibition here on the floor outside where different firms came in to do it. We have never implemented that. That is a way of reducing the costs to do it. And it came forward and other authorities have adopted that. We haven't. We've got LED lighting. We are one of the last authorities to have it. Telford and Wrekin are proclaiming that they've got 0% increase. And if I heard the leader of Telford and Wrekin on the radio a couple of weeks ago hearing him to say that they've saved £5 million by introducing LED lights. I asked for that 6 years ago. We would be saving £2 million a year by now if we had introduced the LED lights 6 years ago. We haven't. They are examples, and I'm not saying about adult services. There are other areas where we can save money and should be saving money.
So your idea to cap the spending on adult social care, let's be clear, is to put remote tablets or something in people's houses. What savings target are you going to attach to that?
I'm sorry, Chairman, we're talking about this year's budget.
Yeah, we are talking about
about that. Okay. I'm not talking about hypothetical things. I'd like to talk about the facts and figures before us now.
Okay, and I'd like facts.
I'm not having a political argument.
No, and I'd like facts and figures off you, Roger. You can't make assertions about a very important service without giving us some facts. Daniel, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just absent Councillor Charlie, who can't be here today. I had
Could you put your mic on, please?
Apologies, I don't have one second.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Right here. There we go. Can you hear me? Councillor Charlie met with Laura Tyler, our Assistant Director for commissioning today, and they went through, one minute, I've got my laptop and my notes here. The proposals for the 3-year market plan for adult social care that's going forward. in September, and a lot of that work was going to cover the sort of broad strategy around adult social care. And some of these specific areas that Roger's touched upon, in particular telecare. So this will be hopefully with the agreement of Health and Social Care Committee coming to their committee in April to start this piece of work. It's a generational project, and the committee will probably take a long view on it. So I sort of just offered that to the committee here, that the Health and Social Care Committees recognises this as a strategic issue, and we'll be looking at it with this work programme going forward.
Okay, thank you for that, Daniel. Joyce, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to come in about the task and finish group on the appliances to help the elderly at home. I think it's wrong to say some of those things weren't put in place. Both Peggy and myself were actually on that task and finish group, and some of those things were and have been implemented. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I do want to move on because we've got quite a lot to get through. Julia, did you have your hand up? Or?
I didn't, but I'd be delighted to ask my question.
Right, go on then, ask your question.
Thank you. And I think we all take on board the comments about the demographic situation and the social care. But what we're actually looking at, what our role here today looking at this budget, is looking at the bits where we do have choices. So as I understand it, that's the new £5 million savings, new to this year. And the reason we have to make them is the additional £5 million we've got to pay on the new loans for the capital programme. And my question is, and it's perhaps because I'm a new member and new to this committee, so please forgive me if this is obvious and the previous meetings of this committee would have the answer. But my question is, who and when and where was the decision made as to which of the capital projects in that programme would be prioritised and what that final figure is? Because it is the selection of those capital projects which determines the total capital spend, which in turn determines that we will owe an additional £5 million a year. So as I see it, we are cutting £5 million from our local authority mandatory services, and we are moving into the paying off loans on £100 million of commercial activity. And so that's the bit I think that should be open to more scrutiny and more accountability, because we are shifting our activity. And if we were not choosing that 100 million, or if we chose a different type of investment, we might not have to make so many savings. I do have two specific examples. Could I mention them? Yeah. So a good example is, and I understand part of it is from a funding grant, but there's this business about £250,000 loan for the Shrewsbury Museum extra project, which is then listed as something that would generate income. Now again, it's perhaps something that I don't understand very well, but I was of the impression that currently there is no admission fee to enter Shrewsbury Museum and Art Gallery, which makes it very different to Acton Scott Museum, where the public does pay a fee, and yet where we are not prepared to subsidise it. So what we see is a council choice to potentially close down Acton Scott because we are by default choosing not to invest in it, and yet we will be investing more in the Shrewsbury Museum, where the general public don't pay an entrance fee, and yet that's listed as an income generation. So the choices before us, which I imagine have been made elsewhere and will just be presented with the grand finale, they seem to be leading us down an avenue where we haven't had a voice. And I've got a separate question about why Veolia's inflation is 6.5%. Why is that an outlier? Do we not have margins built into the multi-annual contract beyond which they couldn't go? And if not, why not? And for how many more years are we stuck with them? Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. I'll let James answer the question, but I'll go back to my apples and pears bit a bit. You can't compare the Shrewsbury Museum with Acton Scott. Acton Scott is actually privately owned. We actually own Shrewsbury Museum, so I think I don't know what significance that is about the charging, but but Acton Scott is privately owned, and the Shrewsbury Museum is owned by the council. So that is a that's a totally different thing. James, would you like to take it over from there.
Yeah, so I'll pick on a couple of those areas and I'll just give notice to Troy on the areas that I'll hope she'll be able to pick up for me, which will be around those particular savings around the museums. In terms of the capital programme, yeah, who, when, how, why was it prioritised in the way that it was? The capital programme initially, when that was pulled together, based on all of the plans and programmes that had been considered by officers and to a greater and a lesser degree by members through previous agreement, were all pulled together into one huge kind of database of a capital programme, and the total cost of that was identified in terms of how could that be funded through external funding, through capital receipts, etc., etc. The outcome of that, if I remember correctly, was that the revenue cost of that entire programme would be in the order of about £16 million. Again, go back to what I talked about before, there was a balance to be struck. So if we had no capital investment whatsoever, then we could potentially have zero borrowing cost, which would then mean there'd be less of a drain on the revenue programme. But of course, the reality is that you couldn't get that programme down to zero because there are elements of development and maintenance that may fall into that through economies of scale that you'd still that would still be the better way of undertaking that. So it wouldn't necessarily go down to zero. But the question is, what is affordable? The other thing to bear in mind is that the cost of borrowing that we've built in is the worst case scenario. So this is on the assumption that everything that is undertaken is delivered within the timescales that's anticipated. And we know that capital programmes often are delayed through various reasons. So if they're all delivered on time and they were all externally funded, then that would be the cost. The reality is that there'll be decisions being taken around whether there are capital receipts available to fund it, whether there is external funding that could be undertaken, and also internal borrowing is necessary. So it would actually be an external borrowing as part of that. So we would expect those costs to come down, but we think it's only right and proper that we give the indication of what that cost would be from the start. In terms of the Veolia inflation, we're in the PFI contract. I'm trying to remember how many years we've got left on that contract, but it's certainly 10 to 15 years, I think, at least, that we've yet to run through that. As part of that PFI contract that we signed up to, there was an inflationary element that was built in, that was signed as part of that contract, which was termed, if I remember correctly, RPIX. So it would take the RPI inflation, and then there would be a number of factors that related specifically to waste collection and disposal contracts, were then used to change that underlying RPI calculation. So at any point, sorry, a particular point in the year, whatever the RPI is, that then is a contractual obligation on the council to then pay inflation at that rate. That's why it's an outlier, because it's a completely different contract to everything else that we hold. But Troy, I don't know whether you were able to answer any questions specifically around the savings around museums.
Hopefully Troy still can hear what's been going on, and hopefully we'll get it back on the screen. Yeah, did you manage to hear everything, Troy? Well,
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I heard most of it.
okay.
If I just come back to the 5 million, there isn't a 5 million borrowing. I think it's $500,000. It might be the zeros in there. And actually, like James has said earlier, we put the worst case, and that's the worst case if we have to borrow, that will go out, and it'll be in arrears. In arrears. It'll be the following year that implications will come. So the 500,000 we're showing within the revenue budget, implication of capital, will be based on previous capital program that we agreed, not the new ones. The new ones will not come into effect until 23-24. That's just to correct that view. And coming to the museum savings, yes, I think part of that income expected from the museum would be income generation and some efficiencies. I've spoken to the assistant director for this area for homes and communities, and that is how the savings will be delivered.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. I still haven't quite understood who and how selected from the total list of the 405 million, who whittled it down to 168, and when is this the moment at which we say we might not agree with that, or is there another moment, or I missed the moment? You know, where's the sort of interrogation of which are the best ones to pick out of that list, because it's the cost of that list. We don't have many choices here. We have choices about where we cut, and we have choices about what we're going to pay for extra above and beyond. And so that list, the surviving list of the 168, surely that's where we ought to be having a choice. So I feel as I've missed that choice unless this is it today.
I don't think it's it today.
Well, if I may, Chair. So the prioritisation of the capital programme was undertaken by senior officers in discussion with Cabinet. So the Cabinet have considered what the capital programme was and were comfortable that an aspirational programme in the order of £16 million was too high, and therefore made a judgment call based on those calculations over a number of years as to what they felt was a reasonable and balanced programme for the whole of Shropshire, taking account of advice from the professional officers in those areas. So that was pulled together on that basis. In terms of challenge for that, then we are, when we get to full council on the 24th of February, we'll be setting the budget. So between now and the 24th is the opportunity for members, public, whoever, to question those that capital programme, that capital strategy as it stands, and to consider any alternative options.
And you missed a bit about museums, because I understood it was actually the government that said you shouldn't charge people to go to museums. Is that right? Or
there was I forget where we are now. There was a period when yes, it was the recommendation was that you didn't charge. I don't know what the current status is.
I mean, I think you do have to pay to go into. I think you do have to pay to go into the museum now in Shrewsbury. I'm pretty sure you do. I paid last time anyway. But it'd be nice to have some clarification on that. I'm pretty sure we do. It's not free anymore. Right, thank you. So, have we got any more questions on the mid-year capital and the financial strategy for 22, 23, 25, 26? Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of questions. The first one is the carry forward figure, which is on page 27. I think it's Annex A, the first page, where it's got review of library provision, 191,000, and then £2 million efficiencies within administrative buildings. Both of those should have been in place this year, weren't in place next year. I note that the library strategy should have gone to the Cabinet of last week, didn't, and it's now saying it may well be March before it comes out, but there's £191,000 there, say, review of library provision. Don't know what that is, can't make any comments on it. It hasn't been published, but it is there, and it's similar to a number of others that are in it. Adult social care, joint accommodation commissioning with partners, £125,000 save. Prevention and intervention, improving public health to reduce social care costs, 500,000, and 500,000 per year for the next 5 years, £5 million saving over that time. Adult social care, review care provider contract arrangements, 119,000. Reshape planning services, 200,000. Building control, 200,000. And in planning services, of course, it's 200,000 per year for the next 5 years, adding up to £1 million. And I can go on all the way through. Review parking charges, £350,000. Traded services, registrars and Marble House Tannery, trade and services, 50,000. Libraries again, another 50,000. Review of Shropshire Human Resources, 30,000. And then another 50, and then another 54. No information on any of that at all. Scrutiny committee is looking at it. Council will be meeting in 25 days time, 26 days time, something like this, and we will be asked to approve all that. Council will not know what they're approving. If I ask questions during the financial year, the answer that will come back is Council approved it, so we're doing it. We do not know what we are approving, And I have great difficulty there, all these savings to be delivered. We need them. Are they the right savings? Are there any details? The chairman asked me to come forward with alternatives. I don't even know what these are, what the alternatives are that's being proposed by this council. So can we sometime receive it, because there will be a budget book as well, which isn't here yet, but all those savings of nearly £5 million plus the 4.4 which have been carried forward, we do not have a clue on how it is going to be performed, what is going to happen. Can we have some information to tell us what we're voting on, will be asked to vote on February the 24th?
I was going to hand over to Twin there, but I was going to ask Twin, will we have the budget book? When will we get the budget book so that all these figures will be broken down?
The budget book wouldn't come out until it's we've gone to council and we have an agreed budget, so that won't happen until February.
Okay, so how do we get the detail of these of the bits that Roger's asking about?
If I can, Chairman, the budget book has come out at the council meeting, and it's amongst the council papers normally, and we get it a few days before. But I'm just asking, can we have it more than a few days before?
Right.
If I may come in there, Chair, that will be determined by when we get the final settlement. We're still waiting. We did get the provisional settlement in December, but we're waiting for the final settlement from government. Previous times, there's been times where the figures are different. So until we get the final settlement, we can actually get out the final figure for the budget. Hopefully we'll get that and we'll be able to get the papers out as soon as possible. But we cannot, I can't guarantee any figure unless James is, any date, sorry, earlier than that, unless James can give any assurance other than that.
I'm afraid I can't be. That's exactly as it is. We try to produce the budget book in line with the delivery of the financial strategy, so that council can see that. But it does depend on having that information available, and it's no mean task actually to pull the budget book out of the system, and then to format it into right state so that it can then be distributed. In terms of the savings that are listed there, we're trying to get again a balance between just identifying the areas where there are savings proposals without creating a document which is hundreds of pages long, which gives all of the detail. And even if we did give all of that detail, the likelihood is it would still leave questions unanswered. So what we try to do is just to identify the key areas, flag what they are in terms of are they efficiencies, are they around generating income, are there staffing implications, etc. We flag those up and then we make that information available. It's clearly going to be quite difficult if I couldn't make a list of all of the areas that the council opens identified they'd like more information on. So to try and do that at this meeting is not going to be practical, and to just ask for more information about these savings is quite difficult, because we need to understand what more information is required. If any of the councillors want to follow up with more specific questions around any of these savings, then we will do our best to try and provide that information. That won't necessarily come from the finance team. That would come from the individual service areas and the budget holders for each of these areas. As I say, it's trying to find a balance. It's trying to be high level. It's trying to give strategic information that goes forward for the next 5 years, rather than providing the detail specifically on each of those savings, because each of them are going to be different. Just in terms of some of the specific questions that were asked, the 191,000 in relation to the library savings, this, if I recall, was a question to Cabinet, if I remember correctly, and information was provided on that in relation to this is about any of the existing library strategy, so it's savings It's year 3 or 4 of a 5-year strategy, if I remember correctly. So that's been detailed and approved by Cabinet and Council previously. There are a number of other savings in there that I won't be able to go into in detail now. As I understand it, we've had an update. The Shrewsbury Museum visitors don't pay for entry to that. Instead, income is generated through retail, and it's only for special exhibitions, which is what you may have paid for.
Yeah.
To go into a specific.
And also, you can make a donation. Yeah.
Yeah.
At the exhibitions, you have to pay to go see.
And the £250,000 that was listed around the museums was is a match funding against a British Museum partnership gallery bid. So that will hopefully cover that one off. But if there are specific questions around specific areas, then we're more than happy to deal with that. But we're not going to be able to deal with just a list of savings, and can I have more information? That's okay.
Right, thank you. Roger.
Can provide that list, Chairman, but this budget started to be built up in July according to the timetable that is included in these papers. So it hasn't been built up in the last fortnight, the last month. It would have been good to have some of these figures and have some discussions prior to that, because the Cabinet and officers have been meeting since July to bring this budget together. I took part in a scrutiny seminar a few weeks ago. The dates were circulated by a scrutiny officer, and I took part in it. And they were amazed when I said the Cabinet member does not come along to scrutiny meetings, and its officers we have to interrogate. It used to be the Cabinet member came along. It was the Cabinet member. We are a member-driven authority there. I'm not sure if William is here or anybody else. We are looking at the budget, and I haven't heard anything yet from him. So my apologies or whatever if he's doing those other things, but they are not here. But it hasn't been built up in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. These figures are supposed to be implemented on April the 1st, and surely there is a methodology behind them, which I don't think I would assume nobody around this table today has actually seen how it is being implemented. The library strategy should have been there last May. There was a consultation done, which finished, and it said in the consultation at that time that the new revised library strategy would be produced in May 21. We're now in 22, and that library strategy should have been at the Cabinet meeting this last week, and it's being redrafted as I understand it. Something is wrong with it, or something Cabinet didn't agree with, whichever. But the library strategy should have been there last May. That's why this figure was in there for last year, because of the new strategy. 14 months later, we still haven't got it. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you. I'm going to move on now, I think, because we've got other things
Can we go on the capital?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, this is the third section. Yeah, last section. Right, okay. So, have we got any questions on the capital section? David.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take you to page 76, which is on the capital strategy, which and also make a general comment. I think that I don't know how the information seems to be very slim on page 76, where you've got very large sums of money, and the other parts have got more deep. For example, we have as much information about for example, the footbridge or the cattle grid or something like this, about various aspects of that, as we do about quite serious things to do with the Shrewsbury and to do with the shopping centres. I'm just trying to get to page 76 on my laptop. Here we are. If you look at page 76, and this is the priority capital scheme schedule, which lists a number of capital schemes but the detail is really difficult to pursue and difficult to know exactly what's involved. So, for example, we've got demolition of the current Riverside shopping centre, 5.8 million, fair enough. Then we've got future development of the Prize Hill shopping centre, 37 million. There's no detail about this. Then we've got, following on from the demolition, investment in development of the site for end use, part of the Big Town Plan, 53 million. Then we go on, and if you look at the bottom of the page, linked to the Prize Hill reconfiguration, focusing on a new civic hub, yet to be identified whether this can be included within the Prize Hill reconfiguration budget, 27 million. Now, you know, what surely there should be much more. Firstly, there should be much more information about what's being proposed here. I'm not in favour of pouring lots more money into the shopping centres. We already spent 53 million purchasing them. We've lost in effect 33 million. Why aren't we actually discussing these and discussing the options involved, for example, to do with Shire Hall? Now, it's 27 million has been identified here. The leader in the answer, the question earlier about Shire Hall, the cost of refurbishing it, and she was talking about 30, I think it was 35 to 40 million pounds to refurbish it. But that's just based on sort of figures drawn out of the air, really. It's just based on the 24.1 million, which was originally envisaged in 2018, for refurbishing Shire Hall. And just putting those forward based on inflation figures, extra costs of construction, which we never do for the North West Relief Road, for example, strangely enough. So, it does worry me that we're spending, I just did a quick calculation here, 117 million pounds on related to the shopping centres and the civic centre. I mean, I would like more information before I about this. I think all councillors here, and I think the Conservative councillors don't represent Shrewsbury, should be thinking about whether this money should be invested, whether this money could be invested in other parts of Shropshire. Why can't Market Drayton or Oswestry or have these sort of monies invested? It just seems to me that we are not actually assessing this investment that has been pushed through. We are not getting information. We have no idea about what this civic hub is going to entail. Here is agreeing to 27 million pounds. We haven't looked at the alternatives. For example, there was a proposal to mothball half of Shire Hall in 2017, I think it was. Why aren't we looking at that? Why aren't we actually going back and going over all these things? And also, we're not looking at the carbon footprint effect of all this. So, I think as a scrutiny committee, we should be looking at these options. I mean, most Conservative members here have not said anything yet. And I think you should be concerned about these monies. You should be looking into it. You should be considering it. And it disappoints me really that more is not being done to actually look at the different options it faces in terms of our investment programme and what would be best for everybody in Shropshire.
If I could fill in there, please. Just Mark may want to come in.
Good afternoon, Mr. Barrett.
He appears to have appeared on the screen. But if I can just correct a few things within that before we move on. The list that's been referred to on page 76 is part of the capital strategy. So this is schemes for future consideration, of which there are plans that would need to be drawn up and detailed business cases before they move into the capital programme. So this is for the purposes of setting a strategy for the next 5 years and identifying the potential cost of a set of plans with the best available information that we have for consideration. This is absolutely not about approving schemes of which there is no detail at the moment. And the other thing that I'd just like to point out is in some of the examples that we've given there, for example, the future development of Prioritization shopping centre, that shows a figure of £37 million. If you then move forward into the proposed funding, you'll see that that £37 million is proposed to be funded by alternative funding options, which basically means external funding. So the cost of the council in that sense would be absolutely zero, and the reason that that's been put forward is because there's the potential to draw in external funding, whether it be partners or grants or whatever, because Shrewsbury has there's a greater market opportunity for bringing funding into that. What you'll find is that those schemes that are proposed, and I just re-emphasise, these are proposed, these are not going into the capital programme per se. Where there are other schemes that are proposed which are outside of the Shrewsbury area, they don't have the opportunity in the same way to draw in external funds or be commercially attractive in the way that some things in Shrewsbury are. So that is where the local authority is putting its money, and that's where capital receipts and borrowing is factored in against those costs. So the three areas that are identified there: Prioritization shopping centre, demolition, and the civic hub, all are identified as zero funding for Shropshire Council and are being funded externally. I don't know whether Mark wants to come in on any of that.
Mark, have you got anything to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, James. It's just to clarify, what we're trying to do is also give visibility to the pipeline. What is happening, though, is in February, both the Cabinet and Council's reports are coming forward on future office accommodation and the redevelopment of Pride Hill. So, you know, all of that will become clear in those reports.
Right, thank you, Mark. I know we have had quite a few briefings about this before. Right, Julia.
Yeah, I wanted to support David Asma's questions, really, and I'm delighted to hear that there are any proposals at this stage, because that gives us a really good opportunity. I wonder if I could make a proposal that this group has a task and finish group to look specifically at the issue of office accommodation and where the civic hub should be, you know, taking into account the pros and cons of Shire Hall and these alternatives, so that we can receive all that information and we can have a really broad discussion.
Yeah, basically, I don't think that is within the task and finish group's remit, because we are not commercial experts here. We rely on our officers, such as Mark Barrow, to actually employ commercial people to actually weigh all this up for us. I mean, I think a presentation would be a good idea, but I think it's very dangerous to let possibly a group of individuals decide on a capital programme for that amount of money without proper professional advice. Mark, have you got anything to add?
So there must be some kind of democratic choice between options on these proposals.
Yeah, well, I think you know, we should at some stage, when these papers come out, receive a briefing.
Sorry, Chairman, we are a scrutiny committee. We do not make decisions. We can only scrutinise and recommend to the Cabinet.
Yeah.
And I support totally what Julia is suggesting. We should scrutinise the capital programme to see if it is returning what we as councillors want. We can take advice from officers. Task and finish group is in private. It isn't open to the public. So I think we should have a look at it and examine it, because I've got a question, because I see this is our priority list, and we don't know what is happening. There was £405 million in the original list, and there's £96 odd million taken out as the economic growth. We had an argument earlier on about how I would finance adult services. I would invest to save. And I used those words 6, 7, 8 years ago. And this council is saying that it's got £180 million in capital reserves ready to invest. The only real thing that it's invested in is the shopping centres. And we all know about that. We should be investing to get extra income. Exactly the same, and I'm not a supporter of Telford and the Wrekin Council. They did. They built a lot of houses, getting rents in. They converted their lights to LED lights. They're saving the money. We could save millions and get millions if we invested our money and had done 10 years ago. We should be looking at where we can get a return, because there was a strategy put forward by previous leaders of this council with £300 million was available to invest, wanted a 10% return gross, 5% net. We're getting nothing like that at all, which is why we have a structural deficit. So I second totally Julia and think we should have a task and finish group to look at something like this and the capital programme.
Hold on a minute, Roger. I think what I understood Julia to say was that the task and finish group should make some decisions. Okay, I think first of all, to answer the two things that you raised, the one about the adult social care, the next financial task and finish group is about the adult social care. And I would I'm sure we're going to get Tanya along, because I'm sure she's desperate to hear all your proposals to reduce the percentage of the adult social care budget from 86% to 50%. And the second bit is, as far as...
Chairman, I object to that. I'm being taken totally out of concept. I have never suggested we should reduce the adult care budget. And as this is a public meeting, I want to reiterate that we need to spend that money on adult social care. We should be getting income in from other sources to assist to provide that. So I have never said 50%, and I will not say 50%.
Okay, so what you said earlier, Roger, was you've been to some county council networking meeting where people had the same sort of demographics as us, and they were managing their budgets, and we weren't, because we weren't managing our adult social care budget correctly.
I said that their council budget they were managing. We're not managing our council budget, and have not managed it since the council was formed in 2009.
Okay, so
we had a present from Shrewsbury and North Shropshire and the others of untold millions, and it has been squandered. For example, the Veolia Waste Reserve, and I noticed the question asked earlier on about the 6%. There was £20 million in reserve to meet all the predicted Veolia increase, to try and meet that over the length of the Veolia contract. Shropshire Council administration at that time decided to take that £20 million out of earmarked reserves to meet short-term targets, and it's exactly the same as the earmarked reserves now, taking money out to tackle short-term targets. There is no investment and thought for the future.
Okay, so the Veolia contract was signed in 2007. I stood in that council chamber because I was not a member of Shropshire County Council then, and I spoke against it, as did my 18-year-old son. I think it was a ridiculous contract to sign. I believe were you a county councillor at the time, Roger? No, you weren't. Okay, so we both weren't there. So we're talking about things from 2007 that, Shropshire County Council is gone. We are now Shropshire Unitary Council, okay? I can't answer the question specifically about Veolia. We'll have to go back to James for that one. But going back to what you said before about adult social care, we cannot get away from our demographics. We cannot get away from 86% of this year's budget is going to be spent on adult social care. If you think that the way that adult social care is delivering the service is incorrect, and actually there's huge savings to be made, then please come to the next financial task and finish group and share them with us, because we're all dying to know.
Sorry, Chairman, you're chairman of a scrutiny committee. We are supposed to be scrutinising, and we are not scrutinising. I have never said there is huge savings to be made from adult social care. What I have said is that there are savings we could make elsewhere to enable that to go. Please do not quote me out of context.
Right, well, I think we'll have to listen back and see what was said, because otherwise we'll be here arguing all day. David.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, with respect, we are discussing the capital section.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I very much support Julia's proposal, because what we need to do is look at the options which are available to us as far as the capital programme is concerned. These are listed as priority capital schemes. We're not talking about sort of, things which people are thinking about. These are priorities. And what's more, I mean, it's identified here that the civic hub is going to be financed through alternative funding option. Now, I don't know what that is. It would be useful to know which companies were willing to fund a civic hub to build for Shropshire. We need more details. We need more information. We need to consider the options which are available. We're a scrutiny committee. We are supposed to be looking at, how Shropshire can improve the way in which it spends its money. And I just think, unless we agree to what Julie's proposed, then we might as well go home and give up, because there is no point in having a committee which is supposed to be reviewing our spending, and yet it doesn't do any reviewing.
So hold on a minute. So this is what I've already said. We're looking, what we want to do is, and presumably Mark Barrow has said there's 2 papers coming to Cabinet to actually give us the information on that. After that, we can actually look at it in our financial task and finish group. Is that correct, Mark?
Yes, it is, Chair, and also in there we'll be arranging an all-member briefing as well to give everybody the full detail and the opportunity to ask lots of questions too. Chair, can I just clarify? I think to Councillor Buckley's point about new offices. Actually, the journey in this sense started way back in 2018 when the council looked to invest in Shire Hall. And then, of course, there's been a range of kind of examinations of functional need, and obviously COVID has accelerated home and mobile working. So actually, there have been different iterations of if you like, the strategy, and we've had different reports to both Cabinet and full council that members have had a chance to look at. So can I suggest, I don't think that there's a sense of people haven't been involved in why. We've alighted on that Riverside Town Centre redevelopment. There's a lot of kind of footsteps in the stand behind us in terms of how we've got to that decision, and hopefully these papers that come into Cabinet and Council in February will fully explain the sort of questions you've all just raised in terms of how will it be financed, what's the business model, what's the time frame for it, what happens to Shire Hall. All those kind of things will be revealed in that.
Okay, so what you're saying is that we will be having a briefing, a member briefing open to all members, which is the first stage of the process. Would you agree, Julia?
Yeah, it's really helpful, Mark. Thank you. I'm a new member, so it's really helpful for me to have that extra detail. So just to be really clear, so I've not misunderstood anything. Are you bringing those papers to a Cabinet meeting on the 16th of February, explaining the detail behind one option, and then on the 24th of February, we'll be asked as a council to vote for a budget which contains the budget for that one option? And you're suggesting that after that, we could then scrutinise other options. And I think that's the point here, isn't it? That surely the options should come before the vote to allocate the budget. And that's the difficulty we've got, which is why I think we need to discuss today how this group gets to feel that we have some options which we can then put forward recommendations before a budget is signed and sealed.
If I can, Chair, to respond to that, I think if you recall the papers that we had at full council on the 23rd of September set out a range of options. It also explained that we'd had a private sector organisation review various options, which is why we've kind of gone away then and sharpened that into the proposals that are coming forward. And just to be really clear, what we want to do is have that all-member briefing before any papers get released in the public domain. So it's not just papers for the meeting. A week before that, we want you to all have that information, because it's right that members don't hear all this stuff from the media. We want to make sure you've all got that in advance and have those opportunities to ask a lot of those questions too.
If I may, Chair, can I just come in on a couple of points, if that's okay? Just to clarify and just correct a few things that have been talked about there. Just to reiterate, this part of the capital strategy is the strategy. So it is there ultimately to enable the funding envelope to be agreed within the medium-term financial plan on the revenue side. It is not about agreeing a budget for these proposals to be taken forward. It's about anticipating what that budget could be and building that into the revenue account. So there will be papers that come forward on all of these key areas. Because of the size of the value of these, they will be full council decisions, and within that full council decision will be the capital strategy. For example, with let's say the Civic Hub, the capital strategy identified £27 million and the funding requirement built in. If the figure comes out at that or less in terms of the requirement, then that would then be wouldn't be a financial implication. If that figure was increased or there was council funding that was required on top of that, then that would be a financial implication which would be decided at that point. But that would come after the decision that's been taken around whether to develop the Civic Hub in that way. If we don't do it this way, what we will have is nothing built into that medium-term financial plan for the future, and we'll have, this is now a statutory requirement that we produce an aspirational capital strategy which identifies what the requirements may be for the next 5 financial years at least. I would prefer it to be 10 years, but actually that just gets more and more aspirational as we work forward on that. It is not for challenging those particular items, it's for information in a sense to identify what is coming up. So I think that's just a helpful, hopefully, just correction in relation to that. Just a couple of other things, just to correct me, Chair, you've quoted, I think, 86% for adult social care, it's 78% for social care generally. So just that's the figure in the current year.
Yeah.
78% for social care of the revenue budget.
Sorry, and 86% is forecast for this financial year.
That's in future years.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that figure.
Yeah.
And just to come back on Councillor Evans' point around the waste reserve, that question's been asked previously. I have answered it in public session previously, and the response that was just put forward was incorrect based on that previous answer. So I don't want to go over that answer again. It's just upon the record that the points that were being made by Councillor Evans were not correct based on the answer I'd given previously.
Right, okay, so let's go back to this issue. Okay, so my understanding is that it's that the report is going to go to Cabinet in February, yeah? And then either before or after, there will be a member briefing, whichever you can do. Yeah, before. Okay. Could you turn your mic on, please, Mark, so I can hear you, so everyone else can hear you.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, the member briefing will be before.
All right. So we're going to have a member briefing on it all before it goes to Cabinet in the middle of February, and then it will go to full council. My understanding of what Mark and James has said is we can actually have a specific task and finish group on the capital programme after that date, because the capital programme is fairly fluid.
Yeah, and just to confirm, Chair, as you probably remember, the task and finish group on 20th of December did have the capital strategy as part of that. So it was looked at. I accept that the members that are here today weren't necessarily at that task and finish group. The opportunity was there to review and consider that at that point in time.
That was, yeah. So, Julia.
Yeah, 2 things. I really appreciate James's work, and I want to reassure you, nobody is suggesting that we don't plan ahead. I wouldn't want to do anything that undermines your forward plan programme. I think it's an excellent approach. I suppose my issue isn't with planning ahead for the costing. My issue is around the lack of ability to make choices and put forward different options. And I'd really like to welcome Claire Wild's proposal that we set up a task and finish following the February Cabinet. I'd like to second your proposal, Claire Wild.
Hold on.
And what I'd like to say, if I could just tie the two together, is I would also like to propose a one-word amendment to page, I think it's 76. So where it says, the final box there, it says link to the Pride Hill reconfiguration, focus on the new Civic Hub. I think we should put or refurbish of Shire Hall. So what we're doing is exactly as James is recommending. We're setting aside that funding in the future. It's almost the same price tag, isn't it, at the moment? We've allocated it there for civic accommodation, and then we're taking Claire and Mark's point that you're already doing that work to give us that detail around the options, and we'll have our moment, won't we, to listen to your recommendations and then put forward our choices. And as long as that budget's been put in, it's up to elected members, isn't it, to make the right choice. So I'd like to accept your proposal that we have a task and finish following the February Cabinet.
Yeah, sorry, Julia. So what I should have said is that the task and finish group will be part of the financial strategy, because obviously that's what we've got, and that seems to work really well. You are not a member of the financial task and finish group, and neither is Councillor Fasma. However, he asked to come to the next one, and I said yes. And if people ask to come, I always say they can, because I think the more people that actually engages in the process, the better. So, you know, we can have the following one after we've done the adult social care one. It's possible that we can actually look at the chapter programme within the financial task and finish group, where we can actually spend the time to actually have a proper look. Right, Daniel, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to, perhaps for obvious reasons, caution against setting up yet another.
Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. It's got to be within
it's just,
existing.
it's just not going to happen. So I think the financial strategy, that's perfect. I just wanted to sort of let you know that we have a provisional date anyway of 2nd of March for your next meeting of financial strategy task and finish group, which will be a focus on adult social care. I recommend strongly that you keep to that one item. So I think the question would be, do you want another meeting to look at capital strategy after the 2nd of March or before the 2nd of March? Certainly so on up.
Yeah. Well, I think let's leave that fluid for now, Daniel, because I don't know when the briefing is going to be about. Mark's going to brief the whole of the council about the civic offices and stuff, so we can actually swap things around. The important thing is that we've got dates and we've got options. Yeah. Okay. David.
Yes, I'd just like to back what Julia was saying earlier, and the point I made about the last item on this list of priority capital schemes, because the wording is very leading. It leads towards the view that the civic has to be created on the riverside, and I think that we should be considering the options of either improving Shire Hall or building a new building on Shire Hall site, or having maybe a civic hub in the riverside area. So I think, though, that's the way it should be worded. I think the wording here suggests there is one option that's being considered.
Can I just ask you a question, Mark? Yeah, turn your mic on so we can all hear.
Yep.
There you go.
Yes, it's on, Chair. Yep.
Yeah, okay. So my understanding is that all the way through this process, all options are open. So we haven't actually made a particular decision yet about the Shire Hall. Is that right?
No, Chair. I think we have made a decision not to invest in Shire Hall as part of one of the formal reports to full council, which is what gave permission then to spend money on design and feasibility work for a town centre option. So there's a bit then about actually what does disposal mean, and that's partly what we've been looking at as well. So I think the principle of that decision has already been taken. It is something that will be confirmed as part of recommendations for the next report. So I think, what I would say to members is, see what that report is, and by all means, then, if it's deemed appropriate to scrutinise that report, then that will be the appropriate time for it. But until you see it, it's obviously hard to comment. By the way, Chair, what we're aiming for is no later than maybe Tuesday the 8th. Because papers will go out a week before Cabinet, so we want to make sure members get it. You get that briefing before that happens.
Oh, so hold on. So you're going to have the full member briefing before the 8th. Is that right?
Yeah, because papers for Cabinet will go out a week before. Well, that's on the 16th, so they'll be going out on the 9th. So we want to make sure members get that briefing before it gets released into the public domain.
Oh, right, okay, or as soon as. So you're looking.
Soon as.
You're looking to have the briefing 8th or 9th or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Right then, so have we got any more on the capital bit of the budget? No. Thank you. Right, so I propose that we just note this report. Have I got a seconder? Are you going to second before you leave, Roy?
I'll second.
Thank you. Right, all those in favour, please show. Okay, all those against? 3. Right, thank you.
Can it be noted I voted against it, Chairman, please?
Absolutely. Yeah. So item number 7.
Apologies.
Item number 7 is the work programme. What I suggest you do is, because we have been here 2 hours already, that if you've got any issues about the work programme, just email myself and Daniel. Okay, so item number 8 is exclusion of the press and public. I think we've got any press or public here. Are you going to stop live streaming? If you could tell me when you stop live streaming, Amanda, if you put your thumb up. Pardon?
I will confirm when we stop.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then we can move on to item number 9.